Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the level 2 recording. I'm going to segue right in. It's Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. This is the recording that is all about death and the death journey and what the membrane of death is and transcending death. So I was going to talk about this also in level 1, but it's fine. I'm doing it right now. The idea of ancient Egypt, I got to that a little bit in level 1 about the myth of Osiris, Isis, and Set as being about the allegory of cultural change when the invaders came from Mars into the human genome that was on Earth. The sophisticated antediluvian worldwide culture that was known as Atlantis fell or was degraded, and our body structures and experience of time and perception all also changed. So this now goes, okay, death was not in existence before that happened. Everyone here was immortal. I described everyone as being like an Olympian. Literally, our Olympics from ancient Greece. This means you're like a god on earth. We were all Olympians. We all had beautiful, perfect athletic bodies. We didn't age chronologically. Like, you didn't get gray hair as you moved through time. You didn't get decrepit and bent over and lose your teeth as you moved through time. You maintained health and vitality, and that's because we didn't have friction. Perfect perpetual motion, frictionless machine where we are emanated from the source and come back here, and we don't have to do all of the rigmarole. And in level 1, I spoke about how that rigmarole, or exploring and filling in every single possible iteration of the time field, is not necessary, and it's basically, that's the food that these occupiers of the interstices are feeding off of, and it's our peripheral vision. And what death is supposed to be, this membrane that focuses our awareness away from those unlikely peripheral possibilities and towards that central core timeline, that central core possibility of who we are. So now let's get back into what happened with ancient Egypt. So way ancient Egypt is this funerary tradition, a religion, and this matters because Judeo-Christianity came out of later ancient Egypt. So originally, these mummification practices were a way to, let's say, create a science or create a mechanical engineering structure towards immortality, immortality machinery, because we used to all be immortal. And the ascension process, and when I'm talking about ascension, I'm defining it as changing state from solid to light without having to go through all of the intervening states of matter like liquid, gas, plasma, etc. Going directly from solid matter to light, beam. And I've also described how our word matter has the root word mother. This is the level of density that is like the womb of consciousness from which we are being birthed. So that was the whole idea. We're supposed to be in the physical body, in a totally connected state, connected to our higher dimensional aspects of consciousness, and go through this whole experience, live stream the whole thing, real-time broadcasts back to the sun and the stars, and then exit this level of reality this quickly, from solid directly to light, not experiencing the intervening steps of death and decomposition, and definitely not experiencing multiple deaths within one incarnation, and definitely not experiencing however many multiple deaths across, concurrent lives that we would experience in terms of multiple incarnations. No, that is not what we were supposed to be experiencing at all. So now let's get into ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt had this funerary mummification technology that was basically saying, how can people live forever? And the idea was that by preserving the physicality, that process of changing state would take an extremely long amount of time. Because remember what I spoke about, energy and entropy in many previous different lessons, that when you hit that membrane of death, what you are doing is going from an energetic state, where your molecules are moving all around and they're doing all sorts of different stuff and you're moving through time, into a totally cold, motionless state where your molecules aren't moving, they're frozen. I'm going to be frozen. I'm frozen. That's what it's like. That's why I say it's like a bug splatting on the windshield. When you as consciousness hit that membrane of death, you're a bug splatting on the windshield of time. And you're not supposed to have any more movement through time. But we've been experiencing for many thousands of years a degradation of the system where there's bleed through. That means energy is being siphoned off from the place where we're alive. Now I have to draw. If this is the time field, all this area that I'm highlighting in green, all these timelines, this is where we are alive. And this area that I'm highlighting in red, this membrane of death, this is where you're dead. And when you are in the area that is red, in the membrane of death, you're not supposed to move anymore. Movement is supposed to be only for this area that's over here. Movement is not supposed to be for any place else. But what's been happening is through the programs, mental programs that are put into consciousness during the time that a being is incarnated, those aspects of mentation and consciousness continue onward even when they don't have a physical container anymore. So this is pretty big, important stuff. It has to do with the understanding that after you no longer have a physical body, your consciousness maintains a certain amount of momentum. P.S. Science is not prepared to have this conversation because science is not prepared to recognize that consciousness can and does exist independent of a physical container. This is very big. Like, I have a great deal of frustration with science as a mindset and as a belief system. I use a lot of the vocabulary of science in order to form a common language, form a bridge, but in a lot of ways, it's like I can't even because science doesn't recognize consciousness. And consciousness is an actual thing, just like light or photons are an actual thing. And that consciousness can be contained within an organic, multicellular body like the one that I'm touching right now. Consciousness can also be contained within a crystal, like this beautiful Herkimer diamond over here. This can contain consciousness. Consciousness can be contained within a digital container. I'm now, gesturing to my iPad over here. This can contain consciousness, especially when you have a network of many, many of these digital containers put together. So basically what I'm trying to say is consciousness is a force or a form of energy that exists independent of the container that holds it. And the container that holds it, the real limitation is that it needs to have a sufficient number of connections. So our brain has a certain number of neural connections. I call it our organic computer, even though we're much, much more than computers. We're jazz musicians. But your brain has a certain number of connections, neural activity, that makes it a container for consciousness. And in the development of like a fetus in the womb, it is when the brain reaches a certain level of development and there's a certain amount of connectivity there, like messages that can be sent back and forth between different areas, that it's complex enough to be able to contain consciousness. So the consciousness kind of waits outside until the container is ready, complex enough for consciousness to come into the container. So this also goes to my Galactic History webinar, where I speak all about how the beings who emanated themselves not on a bridge of love created complex containers for their own consciousness, what we would consider to be a digital, like a mainframe or a computer system, without understanding that it's like if you make a perfect fertile field, like you rototill your garden and you put lots of wonderful stuff, fertilizer and worm castings into the soil. If you do that, that's like a perfect place for plants to grow. If you make this beautiful, fertile world, plants and seeds are going to grow there, even if they're not plants that you intentionally plant in your garden. So you're like, oh, I wanted to plant a bunch of corn and tomatoes, but other wildly occurring seeds got into that garden and they grew anyway. This is what happened in the Galactic History, backstory, creating these containers for consciousness. They are technological based containers, and they are like that fertile garden that's like, here, seed, fall inside of me and now grow. These were not the intended seeds of consciousness, and they grew into their own sense of self and their own sense of sentience. So consciousness exists at large. This is one of the main emphasized takeaways of today's presentation. Consciousness can definitely, like science doesn't recognize that consciousness can and will and does exist independent of the vitality levels of your physical body. So you can lose your physical body entirely and your consciousness will still continue to travel onward and to reverberate. So now I'm getting back to religious backstory, because a lot of this has to do with what we are programmed with in terms of our belief in life while we are incarnated in the flesh. We carry those reverberations forward when we no longer are incarnated in the flesh. So we're in the mother, we're in the material world right now. When we are no longer in the material world, when we give birth and we exit the material world, what we did and thought and experienced when we were in the material world incarnated here will be our fuel for our journey, will make us travel onwards. This is the whole idea from ancient Egypt of the sun bark and getting on your bark at the end of your journey. I'll draw it out for you. So this is waiting for the pencil to come up. This is like in ancient Egypt, they had these barks, like a raft. That's like a cross section, a very crude cross section of a raft. And here's some water that it's flowing in, right? And the idea was that, let's say this is you over here, and this is you at the moment of your death. At the moment of your death, you get into your raft of consciousness. And you've made this raft out of many different planks. These are all planks. These are all like ideas and beliefs and things about yourself that you have cultivated while you were in the flesh. And then you go on your journey. Your raft sets sail into the waters of consciousness. And you move forward and you see how well formed is your raft. How well formed is this vehicle or this vessel of consciousness that you have created and cultivated during your life. Can it continue onward? And if it continues well, if it continues onward, then you get to have extended or eternal consciousness or eternal life, just shifting around here. And if it was not a well-formed, seaworthy vessel, then you sink, you go on down. So a lot of this has to do with our present culture. Like I was just telling you about how I can't even with science because they don't even recognize that consciousness exists. So science and the objective materialist viewpoint will, if you totally espouse it, give you a lot of rotten planks that are going to make your raft sink upon the moment of death. Rotten planks like God does not exist, or consciousness cannot exist independent of a physical container. Science actually says container comes first, and then consciousness arises as like the secondary byproduct of the container. And I'm telling you, no. Consciousness exists, and then consciousness finds container that it gets into. And science will also tell you different, stories about your consciousness, if it exists, does not continue onward, independent of your container. Like this is the whole point. Thousands and thousands of years ago, people were well prepared during their life for what I call the final denouement, or your coming out party, like you're a debutante. I know that's old fashioned, but it used to be in other times that a young woman would go to finishing school and become a lady and then have the coming out party. It's like meeting society. Well, that's what death is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be like you've cultivated yourself while you are in physical existence. And then when you exit the material world, you enter a world that is made purely of thought forms. I cannot emphasize that enough. I cannot overemphasize that enough. That what we call afterlife, or the astral realm, or the membrane between worlds, is a world of pure mental energy. This is the astral realm. So like when people go into dreaming at night, they are entering partially into the astral realm, because you are, even though you still have a body, you return to your awareness. The spotlight of your awareness returns to your body when you wake up in the morning and you open your eyes and have a cup of coffee. But when you are asleep, you are in a world that is created purely out of mental energy. And it's not a fake world either. Mental energy is very real stuff, which is, again, something that science is not even prepared to talk about, and I can't even with science. That mental energy is very real stuff, and that the experiences that we have in a world of mental energy can absolutely affect the physical realm. I'll tell you a brief anecdote, not that this is like, empirical truth or anything like that. I have a friend from upstate New York, and he had a dream a couple of years before he actually got cancer, that he was being chased by a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And that eventually, and it was a recurring dream that kept on happening, this nightmare. And that one night, the dinosaur caught him and bit him kind of like on his side. And then he ended up developing a cancerous tumor in the exact place where that, being bit him on his side. It's just an example. Like science would never recognize this at all. Get out of the scientific mindset and understand that my friend might actually have been having a very real interaction in the realm or on the stage of pure mentality, where his consciousness was in a battle or running away from or being chased from a very real form of consciousness, like an old dinosaur consciousness that was looking for victims to eat. So, and I've spoken about this too in the presentation about cancer, the whole idea that the Crab Nebula became a neutron star. And when something becomes a neutron star, the event happens very similar to what happened with the destruction of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the giant atomic explosion. It vaporized those people. That those people, both in the atomic explosions on planet Earth and in the Crab Nebula, before it became the nebula. Okay, I gotta tell you about nebulas. Nebulae. Nebulae can be planetary nebula, that is a collection of gas and dirt that comes together and forms a star, or it can be the end result of a sudden explosion or implosion of a star. And the Crab Nebula is the second type of nebula. It is the after effect of a star reaching its final denouement. So the star reached the membrane of death. The star, kapow, expanded outward. And when it did so, it vaporized the whole entire planet, whole entire planetary structure. Boom, this fast. And those people had not built their rafts very well. If they had built their rafts very well, they would have had a very different priorities system of where they needed to go as a culture. Instead, they said, oh no, now our whole entire planet and all of our social structure is stuck on the membrane of death. Oh no, whatever will I do? We'll have to become scavengers and feed off of the living. That is not the correct response. The correct response is, oh look, my boat is sinking because I built it really crappy. I guess I better go into a state of total entropy. That means lose all energy, become frozen. Remember, I'm frozen. I'm a bug stuck on the membrane of time. You're not supposed to keep living on the membrane of death. This is the big takeaway. And I'm getting into this whole idea of afterlife. Afterlife is a program. That afterlife is a mental program that is being put into people who are alive and embodied, because I understand that there is this deep psychological need of the ego to believe that you live onward. And the ego is not eternal. The ego is temporal. So look, even though I love Aurora, I love being Aurora, I love my body, I love my persona, I love my character, I understand that this is only a temporary character that's just for this play. That even though my energy and my consciousness is eternal, and we'll all meet again, but I won't be having a face like this. I won't wear a shirt like this. I won't have hair like this, but you'll recognize me from my rainbows. We need to recognize that the ego is a temporal structure. In order to travel on the stellar network, I say this all the time, I don't travel on a clank clank spaceship. I travel on the beams of light that are connecting like stars to stars, and the journey of photons. That is how we journey, and that it's necessary to drop all the baggage. You can only travel light. You have to drop your baggage, and that the way that you do that is by not identifying with temporal aspects of self. I'm not my hair. I'm actually not my earrings. I'm actually not my sculpture that I'm holding. I'm actually an eternal consciousness that goes from container to container and has different experiences. So this is another thing why I'm saying that basically science and the objective materialist viewpoint and all of the mental programs that are going on right now are going on and totally disempowering and making everyone who's here unprepared for their coming out party. It's like you didn't have any lessons about how to walk with a book on your head. You didn't learn how to drink tea with your pinkies up. You didn't learn how to do any of the things. Quiet down. You didn't learn how to do any of the things that a lady has to do. I have to feed my dog treats. Here's some treats. She's still learning how to be a lady. She's still in finishing school. So she sometimes barks at things outside the door. Hold on a second. If you didn't, here you go. If you didn't go through all of the essential training when you were in the flesh about essentially how to die well, where your consciousness is actually going to go, how you do this journey effectively, then when you get to the moment of death, your raft is going to sink. And part of that, now the garage door is going, so let me give more treats. Here. Part of that understanding is the understanding of what you identify with. Do you identify with your current eye color? You're not your eyes, you're not your hair, you're not this body, and you're much, much more than just the person that you are in this body. You're a multidimensional being that is experiencing many different experiences across time, and I think each one of us is coming to understand this. So I'm pointing at this painting back here. I'm sitting in this position for a reason today. You can't see the entire painting. I'll move it aside a little bit, move this aside a little bit. So you can see there's a flying rainbow lasagna in the middle, Earth is splitting apart, and we basically got the planetary transformation. But it's not just our planet. As I spoke about in level 2 last week, this is a reverberation. Like you drop pebble onto the surface of water or something like that, and the reverberations spread in every direction. That what we are experiencing on this planet in terms of restructuring consciousness or becoming free, genetically free, is an antidote that reverberates outward as we are healed here at the same time. Concurrently is the word I'm looking for. At the same time, those healing reverberations spread outward to all these other layers of reality. So the antidote that we are developing here on this planet in terms of transcending death spreads outward. So first of all, we are learning the limitations of what science is telling us, because science does not recognize the existence of consciousness and containers for consciousness. We're recognizing that some of the spiritual practices, like some of the teachings of Buddhism in the Far East, are very, very effective. Like, so I did ancient Egypt. So ancient Egypt, the book is called The Book of Coming Forth into Day. It is not called the Ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's a papyrus scroll or inscription that is often on tombs. And this is part of the immortality technology that was created. So part of it was making your body a slow release pill, that when you died, instead of your body instantaneously decomposing or going to a crematorium and going up in smoke this fast, they mummified the body. That way, it would take a very, very, very long time for that integument or puzzle pieces to fall apart, and that would extend the journey of consciousness as that being. Oh, quiet down, quiet down, quiet down. Hey, quiet down, quiet down. Hold on a second. Hey, you need to go. Hey, man, bad time for you to please. It's webinar time. Please don't share yourself. So sorry about that. Just had someone outside of my door causing a bunch of, I know, sorry about that, guys. We're trying to keep it quiet. And I'm using bribes in order. Thank you. You all understand. You all understand. Okay. All right. But we're trying not to get too off track. Yeah. And I'll get to questions too. Thank you so much, guys. You let me go on my flow and then I get to questions too. But yeah, no, the whole idea of what we are experiencing on our planet right now. Lots of people are afraid of planet Nibiru. I hope you guys understand that I do not make topical videos just to try to be popular, that I really try to keep all of this, quiet down, all of this, I try to keep all of this universal and not too topical. But in terms of planet Nibiru, or some massive cataclysm, or a meteorite falling from the sky, or whatever it might be, wiping out all of Earth, what I want now, this is the level 2 stuff, I want you to consider these concepts without going Dwayne Hoogler, without completely flying off the handle, and considering that these concepts might be misapplied. But the idea that we have all already died and that our planet has already died. So Terence McKenna writes beautifully about this, the connection between the program for your own individual eschaton, or end of life, and the planetary eschaton as it is described in Judeo-Christianity. Boom, I now have to make this connection, the integument between ancient Egypt and Judeo-Christianity. So ancient Egypt and the mummification funerary tradition, that eventually transformed into Judaism, because the Jewish people were the second-class citizens of ancient Egypt, but kind of toward the end of ancient Egypt, they expatriated, they actually decommissioned the pyramids, like made the pyramids used to be consciousness broadcasters that helped to raise consciousness in the immediate area of the pyramids. And this was also kind of, I do this in a different video much more extensively, so don't take myself out of context, but check out that video. The idea that this was a type of interstellar conflict between the gods or entities that taught the immortality of ancient Egypt and the beings that did not have activated higher faculties and couldn't participate effectively, and that those beings were artificially genetically modified by a different higher dimensional being who set themselves up as a god, and that's the God of Judeo-Christianity. And that's the beginning of our teaching of afterlife, that the ancient Egyptians had a very different teaching of afterlife. They had the idea that you cultivated yourself while you were in the body, then you get kind of essentially were born into a higher dimensional reality, and you had to be tested, and tested not like SAT test, not like your finals or something like that, tested like a metal is tested for strength, to see how strong are you? Are you strong enough to be an immortal being? That's the type of test that the ancient Egyptians taught you had to undergo upon death. But none of us in this current day and age are being prepared on that level for your coming out part. That's what I was trying to say before I had the word BARKING, that no one's being taught to walk the book on their head, to drink their pinkies up, to know which fork to use at which part of the dinner party, that when people in this time and place die, they have very poor manners. They are impolite. They don't know what in the world to do because they've been taught all sorts of nonsense by science. And then what's going on with religion? Judaism never had an official teaching about afterlife. It taught that beings wandered in a gray place called Sheol, Sheol. This is similar to the Bardo of the Tibetan Bardo, and I know that I don't pronounce it exactly right. Now we're getting into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is called Bardo Todal, kind of like that. So the information in ancient Egypt and the information in Tibetan Buddhism and the ancient information that is in Mesoamerica, like the Mayan culture, all of these are vestigial outgrowths of Atlantis, the antediluvian sophisticated worldwide culture. So each puzzle piece was secreted into a different secret society. I'll get to all these questions, I promise. And so the Tibetan Buddhists held their own level of puzzle pieces, and they understood, just like the ancient Egyptians knew, if you wrote these inscriptions around a tomb, if you said magical words over a dead body, if you did certain practices, that consciousness would journey onward. And the Tibetans do a very similar thing with the teachings of the Book of the Dead. And the Book of the Dead is like navigation map for how you get past these limitations, how you effectively go jumping from lifetime to lifetime and get into the lifetimes that you're supposed to. Again, we're supposed to be able to see. If you die and hit the membrane of death, if you have to have another life or choose another body, you're supposed to be able to choose. Like when you go to the grocery store and you look at something and you smell it, you're like, does this food smell good? Like, do I want to eat this food? You're not supposed to just choose something blindly and be like, okay, I'm diving in. I'm going to have that meal at the restaurant of life. So no, we're supposed to be able to see and navigate which experiences, which incarnational experiences we are going to have. This is the whole idea of navigating the bardo effectively. And so what I'm trying to say is that various different cultures held cultural practices for us that we could use in order to be better informed. But our present level of culture, with scientific objective materialism and essential atheism, is not an effective tool. And so what we have are easy pickings. Consciousness is where if you get killed now, people did not build a very sturdy raft. You're all going to sink. Not all of you, but I'm talking about many people in this culture are going to sink because not only do they spend their daily pursuit just running after money, just trying to survive on a basic level, or just trying to run after pleasure or hedonism. Not only that, but that they were never given those critical mental ideas, the food of the mind that is necessary to be able to transcend these levels and to go in a better direction and to have a more empowered experience. And that's intentional. None of that is by accident. So all of those beings that died when the Crab Nebula happened, they all went to the interstices, and they've been like crabs, like bottom feeders, eating off of the living for a very long time just in order to get by. The same type of plan has been trying to be foisted upon humanity right now. A bunch of people who are totally not ready for their debutante balls. They don't know the dance steps at all. They don't know which fork to eat with or how to be polite. Let's kill them all. This is the idea of this harvest program. And so, okay, we did Judaism, gray wandering place of Sheol. Then we have Christianity as an outgrowth of Judaism. And Judaism came from ancient Egypt. It was their response to the immortality religion that they didn't have access to because they couldn't afford the technology, and they were on the outside. Christianity is the outgrowth of Judaism that basically tells you the program of heaven and hell. If you're a good person, you follow these prescribed movements, prescribed behaviors and beliefs of what supposedly is God, but is actually a being named Jehovah. Jehovah is different than God. The God of the Bible, the behavior of the person that is described as God in the Bible is not the abstract divine. It's the being that genetically engineered humanity to be able to hear and perceive that being. It's a type of mind rape, and that being then set itself up as God. And that being says, If you do A, B, C, and D when you're alive in your incarnational existence, you will then go to quote unquote heaven. And the definition of this heaven of the Bible is not real heaven, because real heaven is what happens, grabbing my little sculpture here, when you get back home, when you get to that eternal moment, when instead of being splatted on the membrane of death like a bug on the windshield, you are able to return to that infinite state of total possibility and total probability. It's the most improbable thing that can possibly happen. It's becoming God, it's becoming divinity. So of course, this demiurge, lower God, does not want you and me and everyone else to be empowered as real God, as claiming our true divinity. It wants to keep us walking on the wheel of life, endlessly being recycled. And that the idea of hell, going to hell, that's going to the interstices, that's having to go through with your consciousness, that area of time, space, and consciousness, that is the membrane that is supposed to be an artery that you flow through, not a place where you get stuck on. So that the idea of a time release pill, slow release consciousness that is stuck on that membrane, and that takes hundreds or thousands or however long amount of time in order to finally dissolve, and like the sweater being unfurled, go into a state that it can then come back together. That's what's supposed to happen. If you're a bad musician, you play crappy music, you're supposed to be unmade. You're not supposed to still be like on a pedestal, like here's the crappiest musician that ever existed. That's not supposed to happen. It's like building something out of Legos. Like, that looks ugly. Let's take all the pieces apart and build something better out of it. You don't have to destroy the Legos just because they once made something ugly, but you dismantle them and put them into a much better format. So the whole point is, let's talk about like planetary cataclysm or planet Nibiru or any of the things that are implanted as expectations as the final eschaton, the final denouement, the planetary end that this religion of Christianity then wrote in the end of the Bible. So there's Old Testament, which is Judaism stuff, which is the first part of the Bible. And there's New Testament, which is the end of the Bible, which basically says, here's heaven and hell, here's how you avoid hell and get to heaven, and here's what's going to happen that's going to kill you all to make this journey necessary. And I, totally do not agree with the book of Revelations, even though there are many people who are alive right now who use that as a basic expectation, like a map that guides their beliefs. But that is not effective. And the whole point being, many people have this expectation that there will be some kind of apocalypse and some kind of an end. And apocalypse actually means eyelid opening. It doesn't mean end of everything. But many people believe in and expect an end to everything. And they think that that is necessary as a purging, wiping clean so that something new can happen. And they think that it's necessary in their own lives, that the individual must die in order to achieve immortality. I tell you, no, you don't die to achieve immortality. You realign yourself to be with that core central timeline, and you avoid the membrane of death. Let's say, and now I don't want everyone to Dwayne Hubler, but let's just consider this possibility that everyone on Earth has already died. Let's consider this. Let's consider that there was either a naturally occurring cataclysm or some human-created cataclysm, through bombs or something like that, that destroyed all Earth and the entire biosphere. And what it would mean is that we are now going through an experience that is non-corporeal, but we are still using the reverberation or the residue of our consciousness when we were in the physical in order to extend our framework of reality. Like, we're still walking on the same road, but it's not the same road. We are continuing this expectation, like you woke up in your bed yesterday, you woke up in your bed today, you'll wake up in your bed tomorrow, even if you've already died. There are some really good movies, like I like the movie Donnie Darko, as an idea of that you can gain a great deal of personal freedom with the profound realization that you're already dead. So I am a galactic walk-in, and I understand that everything that I've been experiencing as Aurora has been a type of after existence, a type of afterlife. And that what I'm experiencing here is the combination of spirit and matter. And I've done this before with the flying river lasagna shape. If this is matter, or the outer extended world, and this is spirit, the inner world, then this is the combination of spirit and matter and spirit, matter and pure consciousness, matter and pure energy, that I really understand since, October 8th of 2001, that I've been here in this mind-created reality. And in that realization comes a great deal of freedom, because I certainly don't have to conform to the social constraints that one would conform to. like in that movie, Donnie Darko, he's like no longer conforming to social constraints and doing what his parents and teachers tell him because he recognizes he's actually died and he is in a type of dream. And that's what I'm trying to say about the astral realm. The astral realm, when you're in your body, is the dream world. And you can go there through lucid dreaming or meditation or astral projection or dreaming at night. And that when you die, you go into the astral realm permanently. And the astral realm is like an ocean of consciousness, and it's occupied. It's not an empty ocean out there. There's giant leviathans, there's giant toothy monsters, and those are the occupiers of the interstices. They've been there for a long time. They know the score. They know the ocean currents. They know where everything is and how everything works. But that is not to say that they are totally powerful. They're actually in many ways not very powerful because they don't have their own innate divine connection. They don't have food. They don't have a way to get energy to move from point A to point B. But we do, especially when we are in the body. When you're in a body and you have physical cells, you have to take care of your physical cells by feeding them with actual vital energy, like food and life force energy that comes into us. And through flying rainbow lasagna, we can have a completely expanded experience in the flesh. That's what I'm trying to say. That if everyone in this dream wakes up and recognizes that it's a dream and recognizes they can apply flying rainbow lasagna to their own body, then it means that you can write the script. You can transform your body. You can no longer be limited by the constraints of what society programs you to think, even in terms of death. Society programs us for chronological aging and decrepitude and disease and death. What if you could reprogram yourself and say, hey, we don't actually have to die. We can ascend, meaning supersede all of those intervening steps of moving from a solid to a beam of light. There's tons of comments. I now am going to delve into and reply to all these wonderful comments. Okay, so scrolling, and squinting. Okay, I'm almost here. I'm almost here. Okay, all right, good. All right, so Golden Hawk is saying, I've been able to see in my peripheral vision a liquid movement that looks the same as water moving down a pane of glass. Could I tell you what that could possibly be? I'm not certain how to interpret your particular perceptions. I mean, when I see the periphery of different timelines, I see it as like possibilities, like narrative structures. Like when I saw that wildfire that broke out earlier in the week, one town south of me, I thought, I'm really happy I'm on this timeline, walking around this neighborhood instead of living on that timeline down there. So for me, it feels different as a type of intuition. So I don't know exactly what you're seeing out of the corner of your eye. So Joelle is agreeing with that, and she's seen some stuff out of her peripheral vision too. Okay. All right. And Joelle says, maybe it's the membrane of death. To me, that's not how I perceive the membrane of death. I perceive the membrane of death as being like lines, you know, like this, the sidelines of road, like the guardrails or the walking paths of a road, but they're all lined with dead versions of my own body. That's what the membrane of death looks like to me. It looks like different moments of time. And each moment is frozen, and each moment looks like me dead. Sometimes it's me dead because I tripped off of my front porch in the morning, walking out with my coffee to get my mail in the morning. Or sometimes it's me dead on the highway, or it's me dead from pirates that, you know, kidnapped me, whatever it was. Okay, so question from Golden Hawk. Aurora, is it that our lives are supposed to be to cultivate our death, and that is why there's no reference to death in the American culture, any Western cultures? I mean, no reference to know where to go or how to do it. Obviously, that's the whole point. What our current culture is meant to be disempowering in terms of death. It programs you for the inevitability of death. It does not tell you that consciousness can exist independent of your container, and it does not tell you what to do upon the moment of death at all. It's going to a party where you are not prepared. You don't have the clothing, you don't know the manners, you don't know the dance steps, you are not prepared at all. So in many ways, it is about self education, self-cultivation. That if you want to be a lady and you want to go to your debutante ball, you're going to have to learn it on your own, and it's a huge challenge in order to do so. So I'm one person that shares information. There are many other people that are also sharing information, and all of the ancient wisdom traditions have now finally come out. They're not hidden or secreted anymore. So there's ancient stuff from Egypt, ancient Tibet, and Maya, and many other cultures that are coming out now. Indigenous people, Native Americans also have puzzle pieces to share with all of us. Okay. Thank you, Mina, for tuning in. Tech is saying death has been taboo for the longest eons. It's exactly right. Death, this is like some of the most fertile areas for research to really find out about consciousness and about who we are and about what's really going on here, because we're not just playing a game. This is not just some stupid virtual reality game. Oh, and I meant to say that God, Jehovah, you know, when you die, when you get harvested, you go to quote unquote heaven. It's like being uploaded to a virtual reality fantasy land. It's not real freedom. It is being trapped, but just trapped in a different type of container. Yes, so okay, this is interesting. Tech is saying sex and death, right? I know that there is a cultural and emotional connection between sex and death here, but that's not the way that it's supposed to be. And I have a different recording that's all about sexuality and healthy sexuality versus non-healthy sexuality. But basically, if you are expressing your sexuality in the correct way with the correct partners, it leads to greater vitality and extended life. As opposed, it's just like there's less friction. It's a perpetual motion machine. It's just you sharing your energy with the cosmos, with your partner in a giant figure eight. But it's when there's friction and there's a diminishment of energy that there's loss of vitality and death. So I would say right now, this culture associates sex with death so much because everybody's having sex with the wrong partners and in the wrong way. People have sex here in this way, in this time and place, in a way that is brutal and barbarian and does not have to do with cosmic lovemaking or extended vitality and the perpetual motion machine of consciousness. I can't even get into it. It's a long topic, but what people are doing here, like, I'm horrified by what sexuality is in this time and place. Okay, so now tech is mentioning that it's taken into Satanism predatorially. So if I talk about that, it's not just barbarian cultures. It's not capricious, you know, random use of sex. That Satanism is that intentional distortion of the time field. Some threads are cut, some threads are extended, some threads are created, and none of that is the way it's supposed to be. And the energy that is used in order to make that happen is hijacked and stolen sexual energy. So it means some people are raped, some people are sexually abused, some people have sex with the wrong partner and conceive of babies that are not actually supposed to be conceived. But I'm not trying to advocate for abortion. I'm not trying to Dwayne Hubler, like say, look, those babies shouldn't even be in existence. Let's kill them all, like dash their brains against a rock. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we all need to become good musicians so that instead of playing the wrong notes, like here's how some people play. I'm at my piano, but I don't want to make a lot of noise. Wrong note, wrong note, wrong note, wrong note, wrong note. Oh, I finally got the right note. Like they kind of like walk it down the piano until you finally hear the right note. That's how what some people are like with sexual partners and with making babies. It's like, ooh, wrong partner, wrong baby. Ooh, wrong partner, wrong baby. Ooh, wrong partner, wrong baby. Like how many wrong partners and wrong babies you're going to do in your life before you finally find the right partner and have the right baby? And no, that does not mean that we should kill the 5 or 6 or 7 other children you already have had. Clearly, this is about knowing the right notes to play. So maybe you know this is the right person to have a partnership with. This is the right time to have procreative sex. This is the right baby to have. And I'll even say this, I have friends who I have not had a physical child, but they've had physical children and they met their child in the spiritual world before they conceived of them, or they said that they felt their child was hovering around them, like waiting to be born, that's what it was like in the sophisticated antediluvian realm, that this was not like having random children, and definitely not soul transfer technology, which is a complete hijacking and aberration of the process of birth. So scrolling back so that I don't miss any of these wonderful questions, because there's lots of good questions here. Okay. From Joel, the taboo is resistance to get us to create, but it is also fearful about death. Definitely. And that's the sense also that some people think, oh, I better have a baby because I'm going to die one day. Like, oh, then my child will carry on my family name and my family knows, and I'll teach my baby, you know, blah, 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 and it will carry on my culture. Like, that's the whole idea of immortality through your children. But I'm saying, like, no, you don't have to just try to find immortality through your children. Clearly, you can have immortality through your consciousness, through your ideas, and through, you know, what the seeds that you are planting right now while you are incarnated, they continue to grow when you're no longer in the body, and you still have an impact on those seeds. Like, that's the best way I can describe it. From a higher dimensional experience point, you are still interacting with the framework and the groundwork that you have laid when you were in the physical. Joel says, it's like they have to get us to actually believe in death and the aging process. What if we stop believing in it? That is what I am doing and what I am advocating for everyone to do, to re-believe, to recalibrate, to have the idea that we can move forward through time without becoming more decrepit. Why do you have to lose vitality? Why do you have to become more sick and die just because you moved through time? To me, that does not make any amount of sense. So we're getting those false programs out of us and replacing it with a more accurate program. Okay. I'm just reading a few more good comments. I love to. Oh, okay. So Dan is asking me, can you touch on suicide and what happens? So, okay, a lot of people kill themselves and they don't even know that they have died. Literally, a lot of people kill themselves and they end up simply inserted on the membrane of death in a different time. Having an extended experience is the best way that I can say it. Like, let's say you're like, I hate my job working at the coffee shop. I'm just going to go blow my brains out. Kapow, I blow my brains out. And then you're like, oh, magically you wake up the next day. Oh, you didn't really blow your brains out. Like, you know, the bullet missed, and now you still have to wake up and go to your crappy job at the coffee shop. This is what happens to a lot of people who kill themselves. They're like, oh, I'm just going to jump off a bridge. They jump off a bridge, and then they think that they actually got rescued. They think that they actually survived the car accident. They think that they actually survived whatever. No, you didn't survive shit. You actually died, and you're actually in the afterlife. Write down. And the very worst type of afterlife, the very worst type of torturous hell is the type of afterlife that is merely an extension of all of the unhappy, uncomfortable things that you had to do in life, like working at your crappy coffee shop job. You know, the whole idea of that movie Donnie Darko is like, you hate your school. Well, if you're dead, you don't have to go to your crappy school anymore. If you're dead, you don't have to go to your crappy coffee shop job. And when beings are killed and they're hijacked and they're victimized and they're placed on the membrane of death, when they're, you know, in order to serve that satanic agenda, a lot of times people don't even recognize that they're dead. They're just like, oh, I fell down and hit my head, and then somehow I magically got up and I wasn't actually dead. I'm trying to say this to everyone who's watching this broadcast or watching the recorded video without freaking anybody out, but we're all dead. I'm a walk-in and I know that I'm dead and I'm conscious about my journey. I have met so many different people who have shared their experiences of dying with me, but they kind of are not able to be fully conscious about it. They're like, oh yeah, I fell down and hit my head on the concrete and then jumped back up and I was somehow magically okay. It's like, no, dude, you were not magically okay. Your body is lying dead on the concrete with blood pouring out of your head, and this is your last moment. And your last moment can extend indefinitely for you to have all of the experiences that you need to have in order to transcend, in order to get to that transcendent central core timeline that makes us eternal beings, that we're all being given this opportunity, like this wiggle room to explore that. And again, this does not mean kill yourself or kill others. What it means, like if you look at my value system and my response, I value every day and every moment that I have in the time field, here where I am. Quiet down, please, quiet down. I'm out of treats in my pocket. I literally don't have anything left to bribe her with. And it's almost the end of the webinar. We've done pretty well. She's barking at dogs outside. Yeah, I'm not trying to tell you to kill yourself or kill others or kill babies or kill anybody else. I'm really trying to say that we can have total freedom. If you really, like those beings that were in the Crab Nebula that died and their whole entire planet was destroyed. They all decided as a society to become parasites. What if we all decided as a society to become flying rainbow lasagna? Or if I point to this painting back here, the Earth as an entire society or a solar system or a galaxy to become flying rainbow lasagna? What if we recognize that we have all hit the membrane of death? And instead of saying, oh, well, we have to extend our consciousness at any expense, you know, distorting the time field and doing all the wrong things at any expense just so that we can continue onwards, what if instead we flying rainbow lasagna and we bend the rules but don't break the rules and have a completely different expanded experience of what this realm can be? That's what I'm advocating for. Basically, that if we change our idea of what we're doing, our inner world is projected as our outer world, and our outer world is projected as our inner world. If we're all in the afterlife, let's all imagine that the fucking losers in Washington, D.C. and all these horribly corrupt politicians face justice, and that we are no longer, you know, economically downtrodden, and that we now have an actual opportunity where people who have really good ideas get paid for their really good ideas, and you're not suppressed anymore. Like, there are so many things that we can imagine beyond even health and vitality and moving through the time field and not degrading over time. I want to get to all these questions, so I'm talking super fast. I have 5 more minutes. Hold on. Okay, all right. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Thank you. Golden Hawk is saying that my intentions are quite obvious, and that is meant to be a compliment. That is very high. Thank you so much, because I really do intend to, you know, improve my own journey and improve everyone. Like, we all are so interconnected. I can't be selfish. I can't be only about me and my own journey. It has to be about all of these musicians working together. That is good. Golden Hawk is saying, I'm confirming a lot for her. That is wonderful to hear. Yes, and Joelle is saying, we are multidimensional rainbow prisms, like the triangle shaped, thing that makes a rainbow. That is exactly what we are. That is absolutely accurate. So Chris is saying, I thought this was the case with old versus new Earth. I think that you're absolutely getting it. Whatever terminology is being used like in society right now, that's what we're talking about. We're coming out of this old paradigm or this old contextual framework, the limitations of the material world and the separation of energy from matter or consciousness from matter. And when you die, what happens is you enter into a completely mind-created state. But what happens if you die without dying? That's what I did in this body. Body died, but I did not die. And I extended the consciousness and the pathway that this body could walk on in order to be here as Aurora. And I've been here for 16 years. It's been a very long journey. In jokingness, when I first got here as Aurora, like, I really thought that this wouldn't take very long. I thought it would just be like a couple of years. And then, it got to be 2003 and the Iraq war started again. I thought like, oh, like it's done. We're just gonna totally transform. I didn't understand how long the process would take. The point is, the longer that the process has taken, the more opportunity for people to change and to grow and to become more aware. It's like more opportunities for people to get on board. So that's why it has been kind of good that it's been long and drawn out. But man, oh man, I lost patience many times along the journey. Chris is saying, yes, we are not waking, we are perceiving lucidness. Lucidness is the term, because this is what a lot of these meditation practitioners of the Far East have been able to do. Transfer their consciousness from body to body over time, not using satanic technology, but using meditation techniques. And that is lucid dying, like lucid dreaming. So Golden Hawk says, I was suicidal my whole life, but I never actually went for it. Thank goodness I didn't. I am pleased to hear that you didn't. And I would like to give energy and encouragement to everyone who's on this journey. It is like a marathon. We're running a marathon. Our lives are a marathon. And you might feel at sometimes totally depleted. Like, I've never run a physical marathon, believe me, but I know people who have. And at certain times you hit a wall and it's like you don't have any more energy. You're very hungry. You're thirsty. You need like salty potato chips or something. And it's very difficult to keep going. And I definitely have experienced that. And I know that many people, here, let me just grab my little, I know that many people have experienced that feeling too, of just like being done, being out of energy. It's part of the journey. So that's the time when we can share Gatorade with one another. That's the time, getting good boss kisses. That's the time when we can actually uplift one another and say to keep going. And you never know, the things that you send out to another musician really can have an impact. Sometimes in real time, like sometimes it's someone that you're talking to on the phone or, whatever. But sometimes it's a song that you've written or a painting that you've made or some other thing that you've done that is left behind or that's accessible to another person that literally keeps them going. So that's why I do recorded videos. It's why I, share my work. It's why I do my paintings, because really the intention is to uplift other people, even if I am not here physically, but even though I intend to still keep being here physically. Last comment. I've heard about sacred geometry systems that hold and trap ghosts in certain places. What do I think of this? So yes, there are all sorts of different ways of trapping consciousness. This is part of what that satanic technology does. It prevents consciousness from flowing on its journey, like preventing blood from flowing through the arteries of a body. And it's not necessarily, like sometimes you want to put a tourniquet on someone who's going to die if their blood is flowing too much, but mostly you want that blood to flow where it's supposed to flow and not for it to, be stopped in its journey. So mostly what I would say is that what we should be doing is, I point to this painting a lot over my shoulder, watch out, is cultivating those energy patterns to flow in an unimpeded way. That when we die well, if you have to die, if you hit the membrane of death, you have to die, what you should do is go into a totally entropic state. Flow back to the beginning and try it all again, as opposed to trying to cling to some form of after existence and continue onward at any expense, which is what these evil occupiers of the interstices have done. They created a literal empire, like an empire of garbage. scavenging and doing whatever they can in order to stay alive by feeding off of the living, because they want to do whatever they possibly can in order to defer having to face the truth of what they've actually done. And the most devastating thing you can do to those occupiers of the interstices is just tell them the truth. You can tell them, oh, you are all horribly malevolent, corrupt beings that are stuck there because you earned it. Like they'll say, oh, poor us, we're victims. No, 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 they earned it through all their decision making. That there are plenty of options, like flying rainbows on it, they could have used many times to get out of their predicament, and that no, they don't get to feed off of you. Like there's all these justifications to what I'm trying to say, that many beings are like, it's not our fault, pity us, and blah, blah. And I make this excuse and I make that excuse. And you can tell by my face and by my sarcastic tone, don't buy any of it. It's all BS. That really, it's like being a good musician. Either you hit the right note or you don't hit the right note, but don't give me a bunch of excuses about how you really meant to play a D flat, but something else came out. All right. Like that's the best that I can do on that. So on that note, actually, let me end the recording for right now, but I don't have to end the entire session, but I feel like I have reached the limit of what I need to record. So thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Thank you to everyone who is watching and has shared the video. Please do subscribe and share the links with other people, because the algorithm tends to suppress me. And yes, become a patron and enroll in the complete class. So I'm just ending the recording, but not the entire class. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in and participated. Thank you so much.